took me 8 years to get close to Walter. But then, an accident gave him intermittent amnesia. Every time he has an episode, he forgets me. How could I ever fall for a beta? Faced with his question, all I could do was swallow my pain and start over, trying to win back the man I love. But when he forgot me for the 3rd time, I finally understood that some things just can't be forced. Just a friend. That's how I introduced myself to him. But when Walter went into his rut, he didn't want any Omega. He dragged me, and only me, into an isolation room and asked in a low voice, "I've had these filthy thoughts about you since the first time I saw you. Larry, will you let me bite you?" Bam! I slammed open the door to his hospital room, rushing in before I'd even caught my breath. "How are you?" I asked urgently. "Does anything hurt?" The man on the bed was propped up against his pillows, his face a little pale. It did nothing to diminish his handsome, refined features. If anything, it added a touch of tragic beauty. He didn't answer right away. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. His eyes, usually full of warmth, were now filled with scrutiny and distance. Thump! I felt my heart drop into the pit of my stomach. This look on Walter's face was all too familiar. His intermittent amnesia had flared up again, and he had forgotten me. This was the 3rd time. My hands, hanging at my sides, clenched into fists. My nails dug so deep into my palms that the pain was the only thing keeping my wits about me, the only thing stopping me from crying out right then and there. Even so, a tidal wave of grief crashed against the walls of my chest, a pain like being torn apart by a million ants. "Who are you?" I heard Walter ask, his voice slightly hoarse. "Who am I?" The first 2 times, I told him through red-rimmed eyes, "I'm the one you love." And then he would ask, how could I ever fall for a beta? Exactly. The only son of the head of the Federal Reserve, an S-class alpha, should have had his pick of better options. At the very least, a high-ranking Omega whose pheromones were a perfect match. How could he end up with a beta? I could understand why his memory-wiped self would ask that question. But that didn't make the hurt and sadness any easier to bear. Why? Because no Omega had ever spent 8 years fighting to be by Walter's side like I had. The gap between our backgrounds meant I couldn't afford a single moment of rest. Starting in high school, I barely took a day off, forcing myself to be the best at everything. It was the only way I could get more chances to climb higher. I didn't dare confess my feelings. Like some kind of creep, I just watched Walter from the shadows, collecting every piece of information I could about him. Thankfully, my hard work paid off. I got into the National Defense University and, after graduating at the top of my class, I was hired by the Pentagon's RD division. After countless days and sleepless nights of dedication, more and more people started to notice me. Finally, at a banquet, the district commander introduced me to Walter. We had finally met. I never expected the capital's legendary workaholic to be so young. "Walter Brown, it's a pleasure to meet you." I stared at the hand he offered me, my own palm growing damp with nervous sweat. I quickly wiped it on my pants before pretending to be calm as I shook his hand. "You're flattering me. It's a pleasure to meet you too."
"I'm Larry."
"Oh, I'm not flattering you. Your reputation precedes you." He curled his lips into a smile so bright it was dazzling. I heard my heart pound faster and faster. In that moment, my eyes welled with tears. I felt like every hardship I had endured for the past 8 years had been worth it. At the same time, a new desire began to grow. I thought, if 8 years of work could get me an introduction to Walter, could another 8 years get me a future with him? From the moment that thought sparked, it took root in my heart like a tenacious vine. I started intentionally creating opportunities to run into him. Every chance encounter was meticulously planned. Every coincidence was my own doing, and every conversation was a performance I had rehearsed countless times. Eventually, I worked up the courage to confess to Walter, and to my surprise, he said yes. February 14th, 2022. That was the happiest day of my life, the most perfect Valentine's Day. I cherished our relationship like a delicate rose, right up until the day Walter proposed to me. In that moment, I felt my life was complete. I could have died right then with no regrets, but I had underestimated fate's flair for the dramatic. The day after he proposed, Walter was in a car accident that injured his brain. Although he recovered without any major issues after treatment, he was left with intermittent amnesia. Every time he had an episode, the people and things he forgot were different. But I was always one of them. I still remember the look in his eyes the first time he lost his memory of me. He looked at me like a stranger, throwing me back 8 years into the past. It was so hopeless it made me want to cry. But I quickly pulled myself together. It was still better than 8 years ago. So what if I had to win him over again? It was no big deal. Love can move mountains. I finally got him to accept our relationship again, only for his amnesia to strike once more. Who are you? Could any 3 words in the world be colder? I turned away to wipe the tears from my eyes, then spoke to him softly. I'm the one you love. It's okay. I'd already won him back twice. What was a third time? And now, just as Walter had accepted our relationship again, his condition had relapsed. All my efforts had vanished into thin air. I felt like fate was toying with me over and over again. It had found my weakness, that I loved Walter to my very bones, and was using it to bully me. And there was nothing I could do about it. Who are you? When I didn't answer, Walter frowned and asked again. I stared at him, the man I had placed on a pedestal in my heart since I was a teenager. The man whose love for me had never waned for a second in all that time. And yet, for the first time, the thought of giving up entered my mind. They say 3 strikes and you're out. I'd already used up all 3 of my chances. I never dared to think too hard about why Walter only ever forgot me. But now, I think it might be just as his parents said, a sign. He forgets me because I'm not important. Who are you? Walter asked for the 3rd time. My lips moved, but I swallowed the words I had said so many times before. Pushing down the turmoil in my heart, I said, just a friend. Just a friend? Yes. But, Walter. The hospital room door was pushed open again. A well-maintained middle-aged woman rushed over, grabbing Walter's hand. How are you feeling? She asked worriedly. Your primary doctor is on his way. You have to tell him if anything feels wrong. Mom, don't worry, I'm fine. Walter patted her hand and gave her a reassuring smile. How can you be fine? You have no idea. When I heard you suddenly fainted, I was so scared I nearly had a heart attack. I keep telling you to be careful, but you never listen. Mom, I'm a grown man. I know what I'm doing. So what if you're grown? You'll always be my child. Okay. Whatever you say. Watching the mother and son, I quietly backed away toward the door, then slipped out of the room. Walter's parents had never approved of us being together. They didn't think I was good enough for their son. Now it was all over. For the next week, I practically lived at the Design Institute, filling every waking moment with work. As long as I didn't let myself have a free moment, I wouldn't think about Walter. And if I didn't think about him for long enough, I'd eventually get over it. That's what I told myself, and that's what I did. But sometimes, things are out of your control. At an awards ceremony for military weapons design, I saw Walter again. That day, after receiving my award on stage, I was packing up to leave through a side exit when I saw him at the door. He was leaning against the doorframe, tall and slender. The sickliness was completely gone from his face. A faint smile played on his lips, and his eyes glinted with a carefree confidence. A man like that was like a beacon even in a dimly lit corner, so bright you couldn't look away. Hey. To my surprise, Walter actually waved at me. I glanced around in confusion, and only when I was sure there was no one else did I awkwardly reply, Hi. I forgot to ask your name at the hospital. I was wondering, what's my friend's name? Maybe it was my imagination, but his pace seemed to slow down when he said the word friend. Larry. I lowered my gaze, afraid he would see the adoration in my eyes. Right. I'll remember that. I saw you go up to receive an award just now. I didn't realize you were such a brilliant weapons designer. No, not that brilliant. His sudden praise made me so flustered my words came out in a knot. Don't be so modest. I know how prestigious the Eagle Award is. They only give it out every 3 years, and they have to consider everything from design philosophy and practical application to production costs before picking the final winner. If you're not brilliant, who is? Walter's expression was soft, reminding me of when we were together. Whenever he heard about my achievements at work, he would praise me generously, making me feel like I was good enough to stand beside him. But things had changed. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fight fate. Silent again, Walter took a step closer to me, his gentle manner making me wonder for a second if he hadn't completely forgotten me. But the moment our eyes met, I dismissed the thought. There was no love in those deep-set eyes. Is something wrong? Walter leaned down toward me. I quickly took a step back, forcing my fluttering emotions down before whispering, "And no, nothing. I get the feeling you're scared of me, Larry." Walter looked at me, his hands in his pockets. "I'm not," I denied. Good. In that case, how about we get some dinner together?" Huh? I was stunned. I never expected him to ask me to dinner. What? Don't tell me our star designer is going to turn me down. No, before I could finish, Walter cut me off. "That's great. Any restaurants you like? Anywhere is fine. Then I'll pick. My car? Okay." Even as I sat in the restaurant, I still couldn't process how a chance encounter that should have ended with a simple hello had turned into us sharing a meal. This was one of Walter's favorite restaurants. He'd brought me here many times before. I guess even without his memories, his tastes hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was probably that he didn't like me anymore. A bitter smile touched my lips. I regretted agreeing to this. After tonight, I'd have to go through the whole process of resetting my feelings and starting over from square one. "I'm not sure what you like, but these are all the house specialties. See if they're to your taste." Okay. I kept my head down, mechanically picking at my food, unable to taste a thing. I wanted to take this chance to ask him how he was feeling, but I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I agonized over it until the meal was almost over, but I never managed to ask. "Looks like you really like the food here." Huh? I looked up, confused. Walter glanced at the table, where the nearly empty plates confirmed his words. "I ate all that." I was so embarrassed I wanted to dig a hole and crawl into it. "Since you like it so much, I'll bring you here again next time." Next time? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yeah. Why the look? Have we never eaten together before? Oh no, it's a little... I couldn't find the right word to hide my panic. "Last time at the hospital, I noticed you were wearing a ring. Why aren't you wearing it now?" Huh? I was shocked he'd noticed the ring on my hand. It was the one Walter had given me when he proposed. I used to treasure it and wear it all the time, but after deciding to give up, I had put it away. I looked down at my bare middle finger and lied. "Oh, that was just for fun." "Ah, I thought you had a partner." "No, I don't." "Good. What?" I asked, confused. This time, Walter didn't answer. He just pushed his chair back and stood up. "Are you full? So I'll take you home." That night, I had another bout of insomnia. I thought Walter and I were done, but his sudden appearance today, and dinner together, felt like a dream. The flame in my heart, long extinguished, was threatening to rekindle. It was just a casual meal between friends. Larry, stop lying to yourself. The fact that he's forgotten you 3 times is enough to show you where you stand. What are you still hoping for? That voice in my head extinguished my unrealistic fantasies. Ha! I gave a bitter laugh, mocking myself for being so pathetic and weak. The next morning, the director of the institute called me into his office. He criticized me for leaving early yesterday and then assigned me a last-minute business trip to the Northern Command. In the past, I would have done anything to get out of business trips because I didn't want to be away from Walter. But now, a change of scenery might help me recover faster, so I agreed. From packing my things at home to getting on the plane, it took me only 2 hours. The following days were a blur of rushing between different command posts in the Northern Command, explaining the functions and applications of various new weapons. Half a month flew by. One day, after a briefing, I was about to head back to my hotel when a tall alpha walked up to me. "Miss Tang, are you free tonight? Care for some dinner?" I looked up at him. It was Lucas Johnston, the Alliance's most sought-after Air Force Major General. I'd heard that Lucas came from a prominent family and had earned numerous military honors before the age of 30, making him the youngest Major General in the entire Alliance. But he had a cold personality, and combined with the aura of an S-class alpha, it made him seem hard to get along with, even though he was just as handsome as Walter. "Oh, I don't think so. Are you afraid I'll give you a hard time?" Lucas interrupted. "No, in that case, okay. Since I was on his turf, it was best to be a gracious guest." To my surprise, however, dinner wasn't at the base cafeteria but at a very private club in the city center. The moment I walked in, I could tell this place was way out of my league as a regular working stiff, and I couldn't help but feel nervous. "I have a friend joining us in a bit. You don't mind, do you, Larry?" Lucas asked before we sat down. Of course not. However, I never expected that I would also know the friend Lucas was talking about. As I watched the familiar figure walk toward me, step by step, my heart nearly stopped. Walter. Lucas's friend was Walter. "You're too good to me, Lucas." Walter casually pulled out the chair next to me. After greeting Lucas, he turned to me and said, "What a coincidence, Larry. We meet again." Yes, what a coincidence. I leaned back slightly to create some distance between us, terrified he would hear my heart pounding. "Your vocabulary is impressive, Walter," Lucas said then, his tone tinged with a hint of teasing for some reason. "Not at all. I have you to thank for that, Lucas." The two of them spoke in riddles, leaving me completely lost. Just then, Lucas's phone beeped twice. He glanced down at it, then stood up. Something came up at command. "I have to head back. Larry, don't worry, you can go. I'll take good care of her," Walter said, cutting me off before I could speak. I sat there stiffly, my mind a chaotic mess. "Why aren't you eating, Larry? Is the food not to your liking?" Walter's voice came from beside me. "No." I quickly picked up my chopsticks and, without even looking, grabbed a piece of whatever was in front of me and brought it to my mouth. But my hand was stopped midway, my right wrist caught in a firm grip. "I don't think you like ginger, do you?" As Walter spoke, I finally saw what I had just grabbed. It wasn't a dish at all, but a large slice of ginger. My face immediately flushed hot with embarrassment. But what was even hotter was the spot on my wrist where Walter's hand was. "You seem nervous." "I was just thinking about something," I stammered, trying to cover. "So it's not my charm?" "What? Nothing, just kidding." Walter smiled, removed the ginger from my chopsticks, and then placed a piece of beef on my plate. "The chef here is a master with beef. Try it." "Okay." I avoided Walter's gaze and put the beef in my mouth. "This chicken is also excellent. Have a taste." Looking at the chicken on my plate, I wanted to tell him I could get it myself, but I also craved this intimacy. In the end, I just gave a soft, The shrimp is one of their top 3 dishes. Okay. The crispy pigeon should be eaten hot. Okay. Black truffle scrambled eggs, steamed leopard coral grouper, drunken mantis shrimp. Walter tirelessly introduced and placed dishes on my plate, while I just kept my head down and ate. Finally, when I was sure my stomach couldn't hold another bite, I managed to say, "I can't eat anymore." "You're full already?" "Yes, really full," I said, nodding earnestly. Walter suddenly laughed out loud. He reached out and gently pinched my earlobe, teasing, "Why are you so dazed?" His doting gaze and affectionate tone were so disorienting that it took me a long moment to snap out of it. I turned my head away, disappointed and flustered. "When are you heading back to the capital?" I heard Walter ask. "Probably the day after tomorrow." "Oh, perfect. Me too. We can go together?" "Okay." I instinctively started to agree, but after one word, I realized that dragging this out would only trap me in a vicious cycle. I changed my answer. "That might not be a good idea. My schedule isn't set." "What's not a good idea about it?" "Just let me know when you're done, and I'll come pick you up. Don't trouble yourself." Are you looking down on me, Larry?" As he said this, Walter suddenly leaned in, resting one arm on the back of my chair, as if to pull me into his embrace. I was so nervous I almost forgot to breathe. My brain short-circuited, and I could only instinctively shake my head. How could I ever look down on you? "Good. Give me your phone." I looked at the hand he held out in front of me and obediently passed him my phone. A few seconds later, a ringtone sounded. Walter tapped the screen a couple of times and handed it back to me. "Let's go. I'll take you back to your hotel." Lying in bed later, staring at the contact in my phone named Walter Brown. It still didn't feel real. I had deleted his old number. I never thought Walter's name would appear in my contacts again, even if it was a new number. The very next afternoon, I received a call from that number. I was having lunch with a colleague in the cafeteria at the time. Staring at the name on the screen, I felt like I was hallucinating. "Aren't you going to answer?" Prompted by my colleague, I nervously pressed the answer button. "Hello? Larry, it's Walter." "Hi. Are you done with work?" "Yes." "Then I'll come pick you up in a bit. We can have lunch and then head back to the capital?" He was really coming to get me. I was so happy I wanted to jump for joy, but with my colleagues there, I had to force myself to decline. "I don't think so. My colleagues and I have already finished lunch. We'll be heading back together shortly." "No problem, there's plenty of room on the private jet." "How about an hour from now? I'll call you when I get there." "But, are you turning me down because I reek of new money?" Walter always had a way of shutting down all my arguments with a single sentence. "Okay. See you in a bit." An hour later, my two colleagues and I were on Walter's private jet, heading back to the capital. Compared to my awkwardness, my two colleagues were practically ecstatic. "Holy crap, Larry, I can't believe you not only know Walter Brown, but you're this close with him, right? This is probably the only time in my life I'll ever get to fly on a private jet of this class." I sighed and rubbed my forehead, then turned to Walter beside me. "Sorry about them." "Not at all. It's my honor to be on good terms with our star designer." He said it so casually, but I didn't dare to read too much into it. Overthinking just leads to heartache. 2 hours passed in a flash. The institute sent a car to pick us up, so I had to reluctantly say goodbye to Walter. "Larry." Just as I was about to leave, he called out to me. "What is it? I asked you before and you said you didn't have a partner, right?" "Yes." I looked at him, puzzled, my heart involuntarily skipping a beat. I wanted to say this last time we had dinner, but it felt a bit sudden. Walter walked closer, looking me straight in the eye as he asked seriously, "I think I fell for you at first sight, Larry. What if I don't want to be just friends?" Boom! Something exploded in my head. I could only stand there, frozen, unable to say a single word. He fell for who at first sight? My eyelashes trembled. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I didn't scare you, did I?" Walter asked when I remained silent. "No." I didn't dare say more, afraid my trembling voice would betray my emotions. "So what do you think?" What did I think? I bit my lower lip. Of course, I wanted to say yes immediately, but at the same time, a conversation I'd had with Walter's mother after he woke up flashed through my mind. "Walter has forgotten you again. Do you still think it's a coincidence?" Faced with her aggressive questioning, I could only remain silent. "Larry, I know you're an excellent weapons designer, a key talent for the Alliance. But so what? Do you think you're good enough for my son? I never used my power to pressure you, and I never interfered in your relationship. I even gave you 3 chances, but you've seen what reality is. You're simply not important to Walter. Otherwise, he wouldn't forget you time and time again." Her words cut me like a knife, but my throat was so tight it felt like someone was strangling me. I couldn't think of a single reason to refute her. "You never went public with your relationship. This is fate. I'll erase all traces of you from his life now. I hope you'll have some self-respect and stop bothering Walter." It wasn't fate that we hadn't gone public. It was because I, a beta, felt I hadn't yet grown into someone who could stand as his equal. I didn't want him to be judged because of me, but whether his mother knew that or not was meaningless. I had already decided to let go, so I wouldn't offer any explanations or arguments. And yet, Walter had followed me here. "You look so conflicted. Your brow is all furrowed." As he spoke, I felt a cool touch on my forehead. Walter's thumb was there, gently rubbing the space between my eyebrows. My ability to speak had completely short-circuited. I couldn't get any other words out. "It's okay. My greatest virtue is patience. As long as you don't reject me, I can keep pursuing you." I returned to the institute in a daze, my mind a complete mess. My colleagues had to give my work report for me. It wasn't until the next morning, when I saw the huge bouquet of red roses on my desk with a card signed Walter Brown, that I truly believed I wasn't dreaming. Walter was really pursuing me, but how was that possible? He didn't even remember me. Why would he say he fell for me at first sight? Was this another one of fate's cruel jokes? I couldn't figure it out. All I knew was that I kept receiving a huge bouquet of roses every day, under the envious gazes of my colleagues. I once called Walter about it, telling him not to spend so much money, but he just brushed it off. My dad sent me to Country A to study. I'll be out of the capital for the next month. I'm afraid some bad guy will snatch our star designer away while I'm gone. So I'm using these roses to save my spot. His words made me laugh. On the other end of the line, Walter's tone grew even more cheerful. Speaking of which, this is the first time you've called me on your own. Seeing as I'm sending you a bouquet every day, don't you think you should show a little appreciation? Appreciation for what? Anything. How about you call me every day? Every day? Yep, every day. Well, I can't even see you. The least you can do is let me hear your voice, Walter said, a bit petulantly. I bit my lip. Logically, I knew I should refuse, but the offer was too tempting to turn down. Okay, great. You have to keep your word. From then on, I would call Walter every night before I went to sleep. Our conversation started at a few minutes, then grew to 10 minutes, then half an hour, an hour. I went to bed later and later, but every night was filled with sweet dreams. A month and a half later, Walter told me he was coming back. After much deliberation, I decided to go to the airport to pick him up. I took a day off from the institute, checked the arrival times for every flight from Country A, bought a bouquet of roses from a flower shop early in the morning, and waited at the airport all day, dressed in my best clothes. From 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., every time a flight from Country A arrived, I would stand nervously at the exit with my roses, terrified I would miss him. But Walter was never on any of them. By the time the last flight of the day arrived, the roses in my hands had lost their morning freshness, and he still hadn't appeared. I stood alone in the middle of the terminal, head bowed like a clown, once again suspecting that the phone calls over the past month had just been a figment of my imagination. Just then, my phone rang. I answered it mechanically without even looking at the caller ID. Hello? Is this Larry? The voice on the other end sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yes, who is this? Lucas Johnston. His answer was simple, but it left me stunned. How did Lucas get my number? Sorry to bother you, but Walter's in trouble. I need to know where you are right now. What did you say? Walter's in trouble? What kind of trouble? Where is he? I asked frantically. The Galleria. He flew back with me on a military plane. After we landed, he complained his clothes were wrinkled and insisted on going to the mall to buy a new outfit before seeing you. But an Omega whose pheromones are highly compatible with his went into heat, triggering Walter's rut ahead of schedule. An S-Class Alpha's rut is extremely dangerous. I need you to come help. Okay, I'm on my way. I hung up and ran out of the airport, not even stopping to think about what kind of help I could possibly be. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the Galleria. The usually bustling mall was now eerily empty, with only a dozen or so beta guards standing watch at every exit. Walter is in the employee break room on the first floor. I need you to go in, give him a shot of suppressant, put this bite guard on him, and bring him out. A military vehicle will be waiting at the main entrance. But I don't know how to give a shot. What if I hurt him, General? Don't you think it would be better to find a beta doctor? I asked worriedly. Lucas gave me a meaningful look before saying, if a doctor could do it, I wouldn't have called you. I hadn't yet grasped his meaning. Why can't a doctor do it? I asked. Larry, I know about you and Walter. That one simple sentence sent a jolt through my heart. I know some of what's happened between you two, but it's not my place to interfere. The reason I invited you to dinner back at the Northern Command was because Walter asked me to. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, I do. An S-Class Alpha's rut is difficult and dangerous enough as it is, let alone an unscheduled one like this. He might not be rational. He might even show unusual aggression. You need to be prepared. Okay, I can handle it. I nodded solemnly, took the suppressant and the bite guard, and walked into the mall. I followed Lucas's directions to the break room where Walter was. Knock, knock, get out. A suppressed roar came from inside. I swallowed hard and pressed closer to the door. Walter, it's me, Larry. This time, there was no sound from inside. I frowned, and just as I was about to speak again, I heard a soft click. The door was unlocked. A powerful arm shot out, grabbed my wrist, and the next second, I was yanked into the room. Bam! My back slammed against the wooden door. I sucked in a sharp breath of pain, and before I could say anything, I felt a hot, damp breath on my neck. The curtains in the break room were drawn, and with the lights off, I couldn't even make out Walter's features, only a faint silhouette. Larry. His hoarse voice whispered in my ear, making my scalp tingle and my breath quicken. Walter, I brought the suppressant, I said carefully. I don't want the suppressant. I want you. As the words left his lips, I felt a searing heat on my earlobe. The taut string in my mind snapped. Wait, hold on, wait for what? The first time I saw you at the hospital, I had these filthy thoughts about you. Larry, will you let me bite you? Walter gripped my chin, forcing me to face him, though it was too dark for me to see the expression on his face. Will you let me bite you? He repeated, his grip tightening when I didn't answer. I'm not an omega, I said sadly. I'm asking Larry, not an omega. Walter's thumb moved up, rubbing my lips a little too hard. Yes. The moment the word left my mouth, his lips crashed down on mine. Walter gave me no chance to resist, forcing my teeth apart and invading my mouth. Blood rushed to my head. I was so dizzy I forgot the reason I was even here, mindlessly kissing him back. Just as my legs grew so weak I could barely stand, Walter lifted me by my hips, pinning me between the door and his chest. Terrified, I wrapped my arms around his neck. A sliver of reason returned, and I gasped for breath. Walter, Lucas sent me with a suppressant. Walter grunted, before kissing me again. I don't know how much time passed before his wet kisses trailed downward, lingering around my collarbone. Then, a sharp pain shot through me, making my whole body go rigid. Does it hurt? No. Ha! He scoffed, as if he didn't believe me. But I was telling the truth. The pain was fleeting, replaced by a tingling numbness as he gently sucked on the spot. Do it, Walter said, looking up at me. Do what? Didn't you bring the suppressant? But I don't know how. Then try. See, can you put me down first? I asked, blushing. Walter looked at me for a moment, a flash of irritation in his eyes, before slowly lowering me to the ground. But he stayed pressed tightly against me. Maybe we should turn on the lights first. I can't see where your gland is, I reminded him softly. No, I don't like it. Walter was always this domineering during his rut. Then hey, before I could finish, he snatched the syringe from my hand, uncapped it, and without even looking, plunged it into his own gland. See? It's that simple. After injecting the medicine, Walter tossed the syringe aside and leaned his full weight against me. That was too dangerous. It's so dark in here. What if you missed? I scolded, a little angry. If I missed, I'd still have you, right? Maybe the suppressant was starting to work, because Walter's mood seemed a little more stable than before. Lucas told me to bring you out. You have to wear the bite guard, I said, pressing my advantage. Walter pulled my head toward him and kissed me for a while longer before finally lowering his head, allowing me to put on the bite guard. When we walked out of the mall, I saw the van that had been waiting by the curb. I opened the door and stepped aside, but Walter didn't move. Get in, I urged. You first, he said, standing his ground. I don't need to be in isolation. I need you. In the end, I was taken with Walter to his family's private hospital. He went into the inner isolation room, and at his insistence, I stayed in the outer room. For the first 5 days, Walter was confined to the inner room for treatment. By the 6th day, his rut was in its final stages, and he no longer needed the machines, just medication. During that time, Walter's parents came to visit twice. They didn't look happy to see me, but they didn't say anything nasty either. Walter, on the other hand, became restless from the 6th day on. Taking advantage of the fact that I'd do anything for him during his rut, He was practically glued to me. Our days and nights blurred together. Although I had helped him through his ruts before, none of them had ever been this intense. By the time Walter's rut was finally over, I stepped on a scale and found I had lost 5 pounds. The day we left the private hospital, Walter took me to his favorite restaurant again. By the time he dropped me off at my apartment, it was almost 9 p.m. He turned off the engine but didn't unlock the doors. I sat quietly in the passenger seat, my heart pounding like a drum. I know this is probably unnecessary, but I still want to ask. Larry, am I your boyfriend now? My eyes widened in disbelief that he would ask that, but I nodded seriously. Yes. At my answer, Walter broke into a smile, his almond-shaped eyes curving into crescents, full of endless charm. In that case, let me be even more direct. Will you be my partner? As he spoke, a blue velvet box appeared in his hand. Walter opened it and presented it to me. It was a ring even more magnificent than the one he had given me before. The entire ring was made of white gold, with a sapphire that looked incredibly valuable set in the center, surrounded by a halo of sparkling diamonds. I didn't need to ask to know it was absurdly expensive. You don't want to? Walter asked, his voice full of disappointment. No, I do, I want to. It's just, this ring is too much, it's just a little trinket. You don't want to accept it? For some reason, even though his tone was normal, it sounded strange. But I couldn't quite put my finger on what was odd about it. It's just really, really expensive, I repeated helplessly. Of course it's expensive. It's for you. Walter took my hand, took out the ring, and with great solemnity, slid it onto my ring finger. Now that you're wearing my ring, you're mine, Walter said with a smile. We haven't known each other for that long. If you're this impulsive, won't you regret it later? I asked nervously. Let whoever wants to regret it. Regret it. I'm not afraid to admit it, Larry. But the moment I woke up in the hospital and saw you, I wanted to pounce on you. Seeing how much you cared about me, I was even hoping you were my partner. I can't believe you were just a friend. TSK. So, that's how it was? I murmured, my eyes turning red despite myself. So, fate wasn't toying with me after all. Why are you crying? Walter frantically wiped away my tears, but they just kept coming. Finally, he gave up, cupped my face, and planted 2 hard kisses on my lips before pulling me into his arms. My Larry, my queen, my everything, please don't cry. Are you trying to break my heart? I laughed through my tears, hugged him back tightly, and said with all my heart, Walter, I love you. I will only ever love you. Walter was clearly taken aback for a second. Then he replied seriously, me too. I will only ever love Larry. Epilogue. I'm home. I put down my bag, thinking Walter wasn't back yet. But when I walked into the living room, I found him sitting on the sofa with his arms crossed. What's wrong? I thought you weren't. My eyes fell on the small velvet box on the coffee table, and the rest of my sentence died in my throat. It was the ring box from the first time Walter had proposed. When I had decided to give up, I took off the ring and put it back in the box. I brought it with me when I moved, but I remembered stuffing it at the bottom of my closet. How did he find it? But that question was clearly not important right now. From the dark look on Walter's face, I knew if I didn't explain this, I wouldn't be sleeping tonight. Who gave you this ring? Walter asked, getting straight to the point. Huh? He couldn't remember anything from before. If I told him he gave it to me, I'd have to explain everything from the beginning, which would just create more things to explain. Better not. I bought it myself. I forced a smile and told a white lie. As much as I'd like to believe that, I knew the first time I saw you wearing it that it was expensive. Never mind anything else, the diamond alone on this thing has to be worth a few million. And you're telling me you bought it yourself? Is the pay at the institute really that good? A few million. My jaw dropped. So this was the spending power of the only son of the head of the Fed? So who gave it to you? Walter asked again, his tone hardening as he stepped closer. It was my ex-boyfriend. I squeezed my eyes shut, unable to think of a better excuse. What did you see in him? He was rich. Maybe if I sounded materialistic, Walter wouldn't be so bothered. So you're with me for my money too? Crap. How did I forget that part? I scratched my head in frustration and tried to suck up to him. Of course not. I like you for you. Nothing else matters. Flattery will get you everywhere. The words clearly had an effect, even if it didn't last long. Then why did you break up? We didn't, technically. I blinked, quickly making up a reason. He cheated on me. Ha! The scumbag. You have no problem cursing yourself out. Do you? Then why did you keep the ring? Don't tell me you're still not over him. Walter toyed with the ring, his tone sharp. Of course not. I have you now, why would I still be thinking about that, scumbag? You're so much better than him in every way, money, looks, body, and personality. I said, laying it on thick. That's more like it. Then throw it away. I don't want to see it. With that, he walked over to the balcony, opened the window, and was about to toss the ring out. Seeing that he wasn't joking, I dashed over and grabbed his arm. No, no, no. Don't throw it away. Why not? Walter narrowed his eyes, his expression even darker than before. Well, you said this ring is worth millions, right? It would be such a waste to throw it away. We could sell it. Yes, sell it. Let's not be wasteful, right? Walter studied me for a few seconds, then closed the window. The very next morning, he took me to the city's largest jewelry exchange and sold the ring without even haggling. I watched as the ring was taken away, my heart bleeding. Last night, I had asked a colleague whose family was in the jewelry business. He said the ring was clearly custom-made, and with the cost of materials, design, and craftsmanship, it was probably worth around 7 or 8 million. And today, Walter had sold it for just 5 million, without a single attempt to negotiate. The pain. It was too painful. But even so, I didn't dare voice any objections. He was rich and he was impulsive.